It's a really early morning here at Sydney's Taronga Zoo, and the chimpanzees have just been released out into the daytime enclosure. That commotion that you can hear behind me is the chimpanzees getting exceptionally excited over the prospect of breakfast. Some have already headed over to their favourite spots by the waterfall, some have gone to their sun-baked rocks. I'm really excited to spend the day here at Taronga with Katie Hooker and learn more about these remarkable creatures. This is going to be a great day. Welcome back to the Burundi to Gombe podcast. This is episode 2, A Day in the Life of a Keeper.
So they're actually fishing for vegetable puree this morning. We've tried to replicate their natural behaviour of fishing for termites that would happen out in the wild. Obviously, we don't want to have termites in our exhibit, so instead we've got a tray in there and we puree up different combinations of their food every day. Being good Aussie chimps, they do love Vegemite as well.
That was Katie Hooker. Katie is a senior primate keeper at Taronga Zoo Sydney. It was an early spring morning and I was about to have the experience of a lifetime. A full day learning all about the chimpanzees that call Taronga home. It was breakfast time and the chimpanzees had just taken up their favourite positions basking in the sun and sitting by the trickling waterfall. I was absolutely mesmerised by the chimpanzees at the termite mound digging for morsels of gold. Katie explains what they're up to.
So sometimes we'll put Vegemite or peanut butter or something like that in there as an extra special treat. And they are using the sticks every day as part of their diet. They get what we call browse, which is just branches, edible branches with leaves on it. And they eat the leaves and often the bark off the stick, and then they save the stick. Makes a really good tool for getting that puree out. So Kuma often leaves some leaves on the stick to help her scoop up that vegetable puree inside. And sometimes they even chew the end of the stick to separate the fibres, so it's like a brush. So they're modifying the tool for the purpose that they need.
Watching the chimpanzees, I could really get a sense of how different they all are, all of their different personalities and characters. I asked Katie to share with me some of the personalities of the group.
Yeah, they're all different. There are some that definitely like the termite mound more than others, and more higher ranking individuals will get access to the termite mound first, so they get the best parts of it. Other lower ranking individuals will hang back, and then later on throughout the day, you'll notice they'll go up and try and get the ends of what's left in there. So at the moment, we've got Kuma and Lisa, who are both fairly high-ranking individuals at the termite mound. And it also depends on the combination of food that's in there, because they've all got different tastes as well, just like us. Some really like sweet potato. Kuma's not a big fan of pumpkin. So it depends on what's in there as to what their motivation is to use it.
Katie, it's really fascinating watching the chimpanzees go about their daily routine, and you can really get a sense of their intelligence, showing themselves using their tools and really working in a community to get things done.
It is, yeah. They're super intelligent animals. Jane Goodall, when she first started studying chimps, one of her early discoveries was chimps using tools. And at the time, humans were actually defined as man the tool user. We were supposedly the only animal that could make and use tools. And then we discovered that there's actually other animals out there doing it as well. So it was quite controversial at the time.
Katie speaks here about Jane's discovery of chimps using tools. However, Jane's early work was the first systematic documentation of the behaviour. For the local Indigenous peoples likely knew of these chimp behaviours long before Jane. Here is Dr Jane Goodall explaining that very encounter that changed her life.
It was a rather damp, wet, cold day, because it can be very cold at Gombe when it's been raining. It wasn't the beginning of the wet season, and I'd been up to one of the peaks and I couldn't find any chimps, and I was plodding back through towards the peak where I always sat, and I saw this dark shape hunched over a termite mound, and looking with my binoculars, I could see, and it was the one chimp who'd begun to lose his fear of me after 4 whole months. And I could see a hand reaching out and picking grass stems and pushing them down into the termite nest and carefully pulling them out and eating off the termites with his lips. And I also saw him break off leafy twigs, and to use them as tools, he had to strip the leaves. So he was using and making tools, which was something at that time only humans were supposed to do.
It's not an innate behaviour, it's something that's learnt. So it's really fun to watch the infants in the group learning how to use the tools, and at first they're very uncoordinated and can't get anything out, and then they'll often hang around the others and just try and steal the puree off the end of theirs as it comes out the termite mound, and eventually they learn it. It normally takes a couple of years before they become proficient at it.
So what does a normal day for a chimpanzee look like?
In the wild, these guys spend much of their day foraging for their food. And, as trees fruit, they'll, have access to a specific type of food and get lots of that at that time. And then other parts of the year, they won't get any of that. It's seasonal. Here at the zoo, their diet is set out by a nutritionist. So she's gone through the science of it all to make sure that they have a very balanced diet with the foods that we have available for them. And so, like in the wild, they will eat a lot of fruit. Our domesticated fruit, the fruit that we're used to as humans that we can get at the supermarket, tends to be a lot higher in sugar. So over the years, we have selected fruits that are sweeter because that's what we like. And so our chimps actually get very little fruit here at the zoo. They get mostly vegetables. So the sugar content is more similar to what it is out in the wild than if we were to feed them fruit.
So are chimpanzees susceptible to the same kinds of diseases and illnesses as humans? I'm thinking things like diabetes and those types of problems.
We share 98.5% of our DNA with a chimpanzee, and so that does mean that they get a lot of the same diseases as us. They are susceptible to diabetes, and many years ago at Taronga we did have a chimp, Susie, that was diabetic, and the vet nurses used to have to come up every day, and she got a insulin injection every day.
I can't imagine that a chimpanzee just sits down and says, okay, come and give me an injection. It must have taken quite a bit of training to get to that point.
So they cooperated with the keepers to train her to accept that injection every day, and so that they were able to manage her diabetes for her.
I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that chimpanzees are also highly susceptible to respiratory diseases, the flu and things like that. Is that true? And how much of a problem does that pose for the species?
Yeah, it can be a massive challenge. Chimps are commonly very susceptible to any sort of respiratory disease. They are susceptible to the common cold, things like Ebola, smallpox, anthrax, many of the diseases that we carry. And one of the complications with conserving these animals is that as we encroach on their habitat, we get closer and closer to them. We build roads further into their habitat, and we're more likely to spread disease, which they haven't previously been exposed to. So it can have devastating impacts on their population. Ebola is one of those, and that also plays into the bushmeat trade as well. So Unfortunately, chimps often get caught up in the bushmeat trade, and that's when, if they have been exposed to Ebola, it then gets passed back to humans as well. It can be a bit of a vicious cycle.
So, Katie, we will come back a little bit later today and speak about the bushmeat trade and illegal wildlife trafficking and all of those challenges that species, including chimpanzees, are facing globally each and every day. But while the sun is out and it's a beautiful day, and the chimpanzees are enjoying their morning routine, doing activities all over the enclosure here. Take me through who each of them are, their names, their key characteristics, their personality traits, how they fit into the community here, and just help me get to know them all just that little bit better.
We've got Shikamu resting his chin on his hands there. And Shikamu is quite a high-ranking male. Up until recently, he was our alpha male, and his younger brother Suli has just taken over the role of alpha male. And we've got Farahi sitting quite close to him on the log there. That's Farahi's favourite place to sit. He's generally the only one I've seen actually sitting in that spot. There's a log coming down over the waterfall, and it's got a part of the log jutting out, which provides good resting spot for his back. So he's also got a good view of everyone around him in that position. He's often seen there. And then we've got some lower ranking individuals like Sudi, who's a young 9-year-old male. He's a teenage boy and not really sure of his place in the community at the moment. And Shona as well. Shona doesn't have any family here. She can't breed, and so she's not very high-ranking. Chimps' social structure revolves around family, and they sort disputes out using aggression. So it's really important in chimp society that you have your family to support you. If you get into a fight, you want to make sure that they're going to come and support you. So Shona doesn't have that support, so she knows not to get into any disputes. She's very clever at staying out of everything, and she's definitely got a lot of good friends in here that she likes to hang out with. We've got Sheba and her 5-year-old daughter Safiri. Safiri's just climbed on Sheba's back. She'll be getting a little bit too big for that soon, but she's taking advantage of the free ride while she can. So when chimps are born, they weigh just about 2 kilos. So they cling tightly to mum's tummy when they're first born, and in that position they have easy access to food whenever they want it, and they're also well protected by mum's body. At about 6 months of age, they start to ride on mum's back. And that's when they start to learn more about the world around them. They've got a good view from mum's back, and it's also an easy ride. And they start to learn more about their environment and also the individuals in the community that they're growing up in as well. Safiri is a very confident little individual. She comes from a big family. She has 3 older brothers that are very big boys as well, and she's also got an older sister. So she's well protected in the community, and she knows it. And but she's got a very fun-loving, cheeky side and tends to get along with everyone. She's just starting to go through a phase of lots of tantrum throwing. She's starting to lose the white tuft on her bottom. Some of our babies have really obvious white tufts of hair on their bottom. We often call that the behavioural L plate. That's just a visual indicator to the community that these guys are really young and they're to be more tolerant of them. So they don't start getting disciplined like the other members of the community until that tuft falls out. Hers is just starting to fall out, so she's sort of losing her cuteness factor to the community, and she's not getting away with as much as she used to. At 5 years of age, the tuft starts to fall out, but also mum's most likely having another baby, and they're no longer the centre of attention as well. So we do see lots of tantrum throwing as they learn to adapt to their new position in the family and the community.
So there's a lot of activity happening around this enclosure at the moment. Keepers doing bits and pieces, a lot of movement, a lot going on. Now, This is, of course, a normal day here at the zoo. This is nothing special. We're just seeing the morning routine. There's a lot of work that goes on here, and I imagine this extends throughout the day. Take me through what a day in the life of a keeper looks like.
Yeah, so it's a busy morning. We start at 7 o'clock in the morning, and our morning starts with a meeting where we go through our records from the day before. So all our behavioural observations that we made in the group the day before, and everything that, the enrichment that we did for them and everything like that. We then make our way up to the chimp house and check in on everyone, make sure that everyone's okay and there haven't been any injuries or nothing's happened overnight. And we give them their first meal as well. And that's when, so our chimps get access to everything overnight. So outside, inside's nice, warm, comfortable, temperature controlled house, and they get all their bedding in there. So in the wild, chimps build nests every night out of branches in the trees. We don't have enough trees here at the zoo for them to do that every night. So instead we provide them with nesting material, usually wood wool or straw or something like that, so they can make a similar nest. And we give them their breakfast, we lock them in the house, and then it's time to come out and clean up from the day before in their outdoor habitat. And then we set it up for the day. So we set it up with enrichment and we scatter their food out as well. So we try and replicate their natural behaviour as much as possible. These guys would naturally spend much of their day foraging for their food. So we don't just give them their food in one neat pile. We scatter it right around the exhibit, hide it as much as we can, and then let them out and they come foraging for their food. And then we'll do some behavioural observations, and then it's time to clean the house. So all that bedding that we gave them from the day before has to be cleaned up and everything like that. And we feed them 5 or 6 times throughout the day, and we'll do enrichment with them at different times of the day. So we might move them into different so that we can get into another area to replace the enrichment, give them new toys and that sort of thing. So there's never really much spare time. If there is any time at all, we're watching the chimps and seeing what's playing out in their politics and what's going on in their world.
Are you feeling inspired to take action after hearing about the challenges faced by chimps and their carers and Laissez Vivant? Did you know that you can help? Find out how by visiting the Jane Goodall Institute in Australia's website, janegoodall.org.au. Spending the morning at Taronga Zoo at the chimpanzee enclosure was a dream come true and an absolute privilege. Being able to see the chimpanzees just go about their daily routine, having breakfast, frolicking on the rocks, sitting by the waterfall, running around on the open grasses, climbing up into the highest heights of the structures there, and just see them do their daily normal activities. It was just fantastic. But as the morning wore on, I grew more and more aware of the fact that I only had a limited time with Katie and at Taronga Zoo, so I wanted to ask a few more questions. So we went inside into the Taronga Institute of Science and Learning. This is a brand new state-of-the-art facility at Taronga Zoo, and it is an exceptional facility. There's laboratories, there's an auditorium, there's classrooms, and everything that you need to really push forward and progress conservation. So Katie and I set ourselves up in there and we had a bit of a chat. Okay, Katie, so let's now talk about a slightly more depressing side of a conservation, and that is one that is starting to rear its head more in recent years, and particularly during the COVID years, this became quite a notable issue at the global scale, and that is of illegal wildlife trade and also of the bushmeat trade. Can you explain, well, first of all, what the illegal wildlife trade is, and then secondly, what the what bushmeat is all about, and then also how that relates to species conservation, both at the individual level, but also more broadly in terms of conservation across really any species?
It's a big question. So the illegal wildlife trade essentially is illegal trade in animals or animal parts for a lot of species, particularly that are endangered. They're protected under CITES law, and it's illegal to trade any part of them. The chimpanzee is one of those. The bushmeat trade is a problem in Africa, but unfortunately bushmeat, it can also be found outside Africa, so it does get exported to even countries like Europe and North America and that sort of thing. So bushmeat was a way of living for a lot of African cultures. That's how they got their protein. They haven't always had agriculture on the same level as a lot of Western countries. Unfortunately today, as their populations are increasing so dramatically, and it has become popular even outside that sort of sustenance level, it's becoming a huge impact for a lot of species, including the chimpanzee. Also, as we're reducing their habitat, for logging, we're building roads into their habitat. It provides easy access for hunters to go in and get to animals, and for bushmeat. And then there's lots of flow-on effects from that as well, because they also bring disease and that sort of thing. So it has a huge impact on their population. It's a bigger issue sort of across Central Africa, in areas of like DRC and West Africa, and where I was in the Republic of Congo in West Africa, bushmeat was a big issue.
Tell me about some of the education campaigns and efforts to change this reliance on bushmeat and to help communities understand that these animals are more than just food on the table. They're actually a valuable, critical part of the ecosystem.
The Chimpunga Chimpanzee Rehabilitation Centre, where I was working, have a massive program educating the local communities. So they go into schools to educate kids about the importance of chimpanzees, and so they can learn more about them and understand why they're such unique, special animals, and why it's really important that we conserve them in their habitat. And they also put up billboards as well, so that the locals community are aware that it's actually illegal to trade in chimpanzee and gorilla meat or infants as well. And then they work with authorities to confiscate the pets that are a byproduct of that industry. So the young ones don't have a lot of meat on them, but they're very cute. People think that they'll make a good pet, and so they get taken and sold off in the pet industry. And chimps, like us, are very social, and they need their family just as much as we do. So for them to be taken away from their family and raised with these unusual human apes, very stressful for them. They also live up to 50 or 60 years, and they're incredibly strong and incredibly intelligent, and also incredibly determined, and do not like to be told what to do. So they make the worst pets. Having spent that few months with Matambo in the house, caring for him to help his recovery, I know just how difficult they are to have in that sort of environment. And more importantly, for the chimp, it's not good for their welfare. So the sanctuary confiscate the pets and then work really hard to educate the local community and through that process have actually been really successful in reducing the number of orphans coming into the sanctuary. So where they used to get several chimps in every year, I think the year that I was there, they got over 5 chimps in that year. Now they're going years without getting orphan chimps being confiscated. So that suggests that the level of poaching is reducing as well.
Now, you've mentioned a few times already today urbanisation and deforestation as being challenges that are impacting habitat on a global scale, not just in East Africa, but a lot of places as well. That is one of the many challenges that the future of chimpanzees is faced with. What are some of the others, and how do you see those challenges being overcome for the betterment of conservation and the longevity of the natural world?
Yeah, again, it's another massive, very complicated, challenging issue that we have to address. One of the side effects of the growing population in that area is the chimpanzee populations are becoming quite isolated. So that chimp population in Tanzania, in Gombe, that Jane has studied for the last 60 years, has now become isolated. Human populations have built up around it, and there's no longer any corridors for those animals to move to other communities to spread the genetics around. And if that gene pool gets too small, then we'll end up with problems with inbreeding and all the side effects from that. So it's really important that we start working to build corridors, and that's where Gombe connects to Burundi. There's a population further north in Burundi that could be connected to the Gombe population. It will require a lot of work to create those corridors and do it in a way that the chimps will want to use those corridors. And it will also be safe for the chimps to use those corridors, that they won't come into too close contact with humans, because there can be conflict when they come too close to humans and they're not too close to farmers' crops and that sort of stuff and start raiding their crops. So again, it's another massive challenge that we're faced with, but at the end of the day, our own survival relies on the survival of animals like the chimpanzee. The habitat that they're found in, we all know today how important these forests are for converting carbon dioxide into oxygen, which we breathe, and also storing carbon as well. And some of these forests, particularly in DRC, are some of the world's biggest carbon sinks. They're the lungs of our planet. And at the end of the day, our own survival relies on those forests. So if we don't conserve those forests for animals like the chimpanzee, then we're going to be in trouble as well.
So, of course, like many young people, you say you idolised Jane Goodall, and you've read all of the books and developed a passion for animals and conservation. That passion has stuck with you throughout your career, quite obviously, and it's led you to a point now where you've identified with a group of other similar-minded people, other people that work in conservation, that there's a challenge in Burundi and with the chimps of Burundi that needs some attention. Could you share with me the challenge first of all, and how you're working and the team is working to overcome that challenge?
So the challenge is that there are 5 chimps in Burundi that, for different reasons, have come to live in human care. They'd been kept by private people as pets, essentially, and ended up living at a zoo in Burundi called Musée Vivant. So for different reasons, those people didn't want those pets anymore, or they were confiscated, and they've ended up at the local zoo, which is a government-run zoo, and have all the very best intentions, but not a lot of money. Looking after chimps is a very expensive exercise. They are incredibly strong, they eat a lot of food, they need medical treatment, and they didn't have the money for it. So as a result, these chimps were living in tiny cages. Another one of my heroes throughout my career has been Debbie Cox. And I'm lucky enough to know Debbie Cox for many years now. She had a dinner with us at Polly's house. She invited a bunch of like-minded people that her and Polly had worked with over the years to tell us about the situation. So Deb had found out about these chimps in Burundi, and Burundi holds a special place in Deb's heart, so she knew she had to help. And a whole bunch of us got together and had a dinner, and Deb explained the situation to us and just said, how can we all help? And we all went off to think about what we could do. At Taronga, as keepers, we have what we call a skills book, where we have to complete certain tasks to be able to go up in a grade. And one of those is that we need to contribute to an in-situ conservation project. So one of our keepers, Holly, came to me and said, Katie, I need to contribute to an in-situ conservation project. Do you have any ideas of what I could do? I was like, what do you reckon about doing a fundraiser for the Burundi chimps? And I told her the story, and she was so excited. And Holly has this amazing energy that you really need to run a fundraiser, and it's a lot of work. And she's just great at motivating people and getting everyone excited about a cause. So we then spoke to some of the other keepers, and there was a group of 6 of us that all got together, formed a committee, and decided to have a dinner where we had guest speakers like Debbie Cox and Natasha from the Jane Goodall Institute and James from the Jane Goodall Institute. And we organised all different auction items that people could spend money on to raise more money. And it was a few months of really hard work, but in the end we were able to raise over $50,000 to go towards the chimps in Burundi. So that's going to be able to help build a new facility, a better facility for them to live in. It'll help. We had 3 people on the night that very generously donated $15,000 to train a vet, a local person, to look after the chimps, so they'll have the best medical care, and it also help with daily running costs as well, so feeding and paying a caregiver to look after them as well. So that little dinner here in Australia is able to have a big impact for those chimps over in Burundi.
It's a busy afternoon here in the chimpanzee kitchen.
Yes.
Katie, you're preparing some training bags. Just run me through what you're doing here and what you're putting in the training bags.
So we've got some delicious fruit to go in the training bags. This is really the only time that our chimps get fruit is in training. As I mentioned, fruit's quite high in sugar, and so they're really motivated to get fruit from us. So it makes a really handy training tool. So with their training, we train them for medical procedures, things like mouth open so we can check their teeth and make sure their teeth are all okay, to present different body parts. If they've got a wound, they can show us that, and also if they ever need to go to the vet block to have a surgery of any nature, we've trained them to allow us to inject them with the anaesthetic. So in the older days, the vets used to come up and use a dart gun to get the anaesthetic into them. That can be very stressful, both for the vet, for us, and especially for the chimp. So with this training, they'll present their shoulder to the mesh, and we can actually then just inject them with the anaesthetic, and then they fall asleep nice and calmly. Means because it's less stressful for them, it also is a lot safer in that it uses a lot less anaesthetic to get them to go to sleep. When an animal's stressed out, they produce adrenaline, which fights against the anaesthetic. So they tend to have a much more stable anaesthetic as well. So it's just better all around. And the chimps love the training process. It's really fun for them. They get fruit out of it. I've had one of them, Naomi, when she sees me making up her training stuff, she'll even sometimes jump up and down and clap her hands because she's so excited because she knows what's going to happen. So we're just getting this organised so when the chimps come in, we can do some training with them.
Now, this type of enrichment and, well, even the facilities that are here at Taronga Zoo are somewhat lacking or even unavailable in somewhere like Musée Vivant in Burundi. And so that's really the core of this effort to try and raise money and improve the living conditions and facilities.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, at Musée Vivant, their facilities are really basic and they don't even have the proper veterinary treatment if they ever become ill or injured. So, yeah, raising the money is to improve those facilities so our chimps here at Taronga are very spoilt. They're really lucky. They've got a really good life and an amazing facility that they live in, and we want to be able to provide something similar for those chimps over in Burundi.
So we've got bananas going in here, we've got some grapes, apple, pear.
Pear, yep.
All the good stuff.
Yep. Bananas and grapes tends to be everyone's favourite.
Taronga Zoo must go through an immense amount of food for all of the animals here on site and Dubbo.
Yeah, they do. And it's all human quality food. Like if we won't eat it, we don't feed it out to the animals. So it's all top quality food.
So our chimp puree here has carrots, pumpkin, apple, beets, sweet potato, banana, eggplant and capsicum.
Yeah.
And it's a deep, rich purple colour. And they love it.
So that combination is different every day.
So we're in the chimp house at the moment, and the chimps are about to come inside from being out all day, and they're going to go through some training exercises. There's currently 5 of us in the chimp house here. Normally there would be two keepers. Today there's 3 keepers, a student and myself. You can hear the big metal doors opening up. Chimpanzees are piling in through the door, swinging off all the ropes, running around searching for all the food they can possibly find. It was the end of a long day at Sydney's Taronga Zoo. I was exhausted and the chimpanzees were ready for bed. But I still had one last question for Katie. So back inside in the Institute of Science and Learning, I asked Katie, what is her hope for the future of chimpanzees?
My hope for the future of chimpanzees in Burundi, and it's the same right across Africa, is that we look after them and their habitat, that we're not having to rescue chimps from the pet trade, that they aren't part of the bushmeat trade, that we protect their habitat and that they can continue to thrive, and that people are able to understand what an incredible role they play in the environment and how important it is. They're our closest living relative. Every species on this planet deserves to be protected and deserves to thrive in its environment. And the chimp is just one of those. I'm absolutely fascinated by them, so I'm particularly passionate about their conservation, but it's the same for every species on this planet, and we're so interconnected with every species that, you know, at the end of the day, our survival, as I've said before, relies on protecting these animals. I hope that the people of Africa, and it's definitely happening, learn what incredible animals they are. You know, they're so lucky to live in a country with such diverse species and to have animals like the chimpanzee, your close living relative, living on your back doorstep. I hope that they realise just how awesome that is, and it's definitely happening in parts of Africa. So I hope that attitude continues to grow.
This podcast was produced by me, Dr. Paul Harvey. I want to extend a huge thanks to all of the guests and those people that have worked behind the scenes to make this podcast possible. Please share your feedback, questions or comments to paul@docpjharvey.com. You can find more of my work by visiting www.docpjharvey.com.